That first video of Iryna Zarutska was her friends remembering her. The article I'm going to read is how her family wants to remember her. Instead of talking about her death, let's remember her. Too often with tragedies, we don't remember the victims, and we need to remember the victims that are taken before their time. This is Michael Carson, and I want to try to help people remember Iryna Zarutska. This is an article over at the Charlotte Observer. It's written by Theoden Janes. It's from September 16th, 2025, and it's titled, "If You Are Going to Remember Iryna Zarutska, Her Family Hopes It's More Like This." And there's a picture that starts off here. Iryna Zarutska's loved ones are trying to shift focus away from the ugly death of the 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee died and toward the beautiful life she lived, courtesy of Iryna's family. That's the initial photograph. Time, in its excruciatingly slow and painful way, had just barely begun to heal Iryna Zarutska's family. 2 weeks had passed since her August 22nd murder on the Charlotte light rail train. The 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee had been memorialized, buried, and her family had taken what comfort it could from neighbors, friends, and the Ukrainian community. They were far from a good place, but they were no longer in a terrible one. Then came the videos. The first, released on September 5th, was brutal enough. Just a few days later, when Iryna Zarutska's uncle saw the longer version, the one that had revealed the moments after she had been attacked, he immediately opened up his messaging app and started a new text. "There's a second video. Do not watch it," Scott Haskell warned his wife Valeria, whose brother is Iryna's father and who herself immigrated to the U.S. from Ukraine more than 25 years ago. He was too late. Valerina had already been sent links by others, and they had auto-played, and before she could stop them, she'd seen the raw images that showed her niece, who in the last 3 years had become perhaps her closest friend on earth, suffering a fate the vast majority of us can only see our loved ones suffering in our most excruciating nightmares. Never mind the fact that pretty much everyone with a social media account was seeing the same video, in some cases sharing it, in some cases reducing Iryna to a political football, much like they do with Lucy Connolly in Great Britain. "It's actually taken her," Scott Haskell said of his wife, "to a worse place than she was when we first learned about her murder. It's been exceptionally tough on her and the rest of the family. In fact, Iryna's closest Ukrainian relatives have largely avoided the media since her death, perhaps due to the language barrier, but mainly because this combination of fresh horror and grief is too intense. As a result, it is difficult for journalists to describe Iryna in ways that go beyond what was her obituary or on social media or what those who only knew her in passing have said. But Scott, an American manufacturing manager who married into the family, spent an hour with the Charlotte Observer recently and provided the fullest picture yet of Iryna's in the hopes the focus might shift away from the ugly death she died and instead toward the beautiful life she lived. And there she is in a dress, probably out in the front lawn. And the caption reads, "The last 3 years were the best years of her life." Scott Haskell says of his niece, Iryna Zarutska, courtesy of Zarutska's family. Make sure I get the picture in there well enough. "The difficult decision to leave Ukraine. Iryna's must have almost decided to remain in Ukraine with her father, who had no choice but to stay. As was the case for scores of Ukrainians in Kiev, life became fraught with the Zarutskas after the war with Russia broke out and routine bombings of the capital began. For months, they lived in a tightly quartered bomb shelter, risking only occasional visits back to their apartment, primarily just to make sure it hadn't been disturbed or, worse, destroyed. Meanwhile, in the U.S., extended family members were trying to raise money and lay the groundwork via the Department of Homeland Security's Uniting for Ukraine program to get Iryna, her mother Anne, her younger sister Val, and her younger brother Bodan around the globe to Huntsville, where Scott and Valeria Haskell could host them. In any event, the family patriarch Stas would be unable to join them due to the mandatory conscription requirements that forbid Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 to 60 from leaving the country. And Iryna, who was extraordinarily close to her father at the time, already an adult capable of making her own decision, initially was set on resisting a move. Ultimately, her mother was able to convince Iryna it wasn't safe for her in Kiev. So the four fled in August 2022 via ground transport to Warsaw in Poland, then by getting into a plane bound for the United States. None of the Zarutskas had ever flown before or been outside of their home country at all. None spoke English. They arrived in Charlotte Airport feeling, understandably, a mixture of relief, excitement, and fear. But the Haskells and their close-knit community in Huntsville were ready to make them feel welcome. Valeria was able to do any translating, and with the help from furniture donated by neighbors, the Haskells converted their 3-bedroom house into a 5-bedroom house to accommodate the Zarutskas along with themselves, Valeria's adult daughter, and their 3 dogs. It was, as Scott described it, a kind of like the Brady Bunch here. In this bunch, Iryna played the role of the popular eldest sister, confident, beautiful, noble, and perhaps above all else full of ambition. And here is a picture of her smiling. That's a good picture, and that's why I put that in the thumbnail, because you should see her smiling. It's a good memory to have since she's no longer around. Iryna Zarutska's photographed in a campground in Virginia during a family trip. Scott Haskell laughs as he remembers Iryna and her brother taking 2 nice chairs he had brought for her aunt and their mother, and leaving the women instead with a pair of rickety ones. That's actually kind of funny. That's the caption for the picture. She knew more people here than I did. Both Iryna and her mom were eager to get a work permit as soon as possible. They wanted to be acclimated. They wanted some income. They also just wanted to feel useful. While waiting for that months-long process to play out, a neighbor got wind that Iryna was taking English lessons through Rowan Kabar's community college, where they were, but was doing all of the coursework on her iPhone. So the neighbor donated a couple of computers to the family, and Iryna settled into a much more efficient learning routine. Then, once her permits were approved, Iryna and Anna both were able to land jobs working in housekeeping at a retirement community, a little over a mile from the Haskell's home. Neither were anywhere close to having a driver's license at that point, and at first they commuted on foot. That concept actually wasn't all that foreign to them. Back in Kiev, like the majority of citizens, the Zarutskas used public transportation to get virtually everywhere and didn't own a car. But one day while Scott was driving he spotted Iryna and Anna walking home, and after picking them up, his niece asked him, "Is there a better way?" And there was. He wound up giving Anna his bicycle and bought a second one for Iryna from a neighbor at a yard sale. After that, they rode their bikes to work every day. Iryna's world grew bigger gradually from there. Toward the end of 2023, she moved on to a job at a sandwich shop in Huntsville, thinking it would bring her a little closer to her love for culinary arts. Her home-cooked specialties, Scott says, included Carletti and Peruska and Borscht. I know the third one, but I don't know the other two. Recipes she learned from her mom. She was stockpiling money for her real job, but also from odd ones she did around the neighborhood. When somebody would post on the community Facebook page about needing a dog sitter or a babysitter, Valeria would offer to connect the person with her niece. Iryna was also a creative spirit who had an art and restoration degree from Synergy College in Kiev. At one point, she was hired by a neighbor to paint a collection of pastel decorations on the walls inside her home. That's nice. Between all that and the regular excursions she took along its sidewalks and walking trails, sometimes with all three of the Haskell's dogs in the leads, but most often it was her favorite, a Labrador mix named Teddy. She was a warm, friendly fixture in the neighborhood. I mean, she knew more people in my neighborhood than I did, Scott says, and she made an impression. Everyone seemed not to simply like her, but to absolutely adore her. The same rule applied in her growing social circles. She made friends both in her native language through the local Ukrainian community as well as the tongue she was trying to learn as fast as possible, adeptly using translation tools on her phone to do what she could to forge bonds with English and Spanish-speaking coworkers. She also was gradually trying to explore her adopted home country, making trips with her new friends to Myrtle Beach here and to the mountains with family there. At the same time, Iryna was also a notorious homebody who often seemed happiest just spending some time with the family or curling up on the couch or her bed with her sketchbook. She also could be a champion sleeper when she wanted to be. Sometimes I didn't even know she was at the house because she was in bed, Scott says. She'd emerge from her room at noon on occasion and he'd be like, "Where'd you come from? I thought you were at work." She felt very, very safe here at home. And here's another picture of Iryna with the Haskell's cat, Willow. And she seemed to taking a liking to dogs and cats living together. Anyways, let me continue on. A big move toward the American dream. In the spring of 2024, Anne and the two youngest kids moved out of the Haskell's house and into their own home to give them a little bit more space. Iryna stayed with her aunt and uncle, though primarily because it was easier bike ride to her shop to her job at the sandwich shop. Over the next year, Iryna and Valeria, who also hadn't seen each other in 15 years prior to Iryna's family coming to America, became closer and closer. Sometimes they would sit on the porch for hours just talking about life, about dreams. In those dreams, Iryna saw herself turning her love of animals into a career as a veterinary assistant, envisioned buying a house of her own near her family. Visualized traveling the world and imagined turning the biggest room she could into a studio where she could draw and sculpt and pour her heart into arts inspired by all the places she had visited. And in her pursuit of those dreams, Scott served as a surrogate father, even when they had to rely heavily on Google Translate to communicate. He was her problem solver, her guidance counselor, her personal chauffeur when he could swing it, and briefly before her passing the responsibility along to her boyfriend, her driving instructor. Then, in May of this year, as she and Valeria both unsuccessfully fought back tears, Iryna moved out to live with her boyfriend in an apartment right off the light rail's 36th Street station in Noda. Whatever fresh homesickness she may have felt, though, Iryna was excited to be drawing closer to her dream. Her new neighborhood was brimming with creative energy, with electric art, with scrumptious food. Being on the light rail opened up her world even more, and she got a new job as a cashier at Zeppi's pizzeria a dozen stops down the line in Losa. In a relatively short order, she was promoted to line cook. Meanwhile, she saved up enough to start planning a big trip to Miami with her boyfriend. But much more significantly, she recently used her savings to buy the first car of anyone in her family, an older model Cadillac that her boyfriend was teaching her to drive. About a week before she was killed, her uncle texted Iryna to ask how she was doing. Her reply brimmed with enthusiasm. "Everything is great," she wrote. "In October, I will have an appointment for the first time to pass the driving test. I'm very excited about it. Soon I'll be able to come to visit you and Valeria on my own. I miss you guys so much." "That was awesome news," Scott replied. "Very proud of you." "Thank you," Iryna said. "Without your help, I would not have been able to achieve this. I'm grateful to you for helping me with this." Scott sent back, "Glad to help, but you did it." It's the last exchange they ever had. And here's a picture of the memorial at the Charlotte Light Rail. And let me continue on. How will Iryna Zarutska be remembered? Iryna's father, still bound by the conscription laws, could only watch her memorial service through pixels. During her funeral, Anna got on a phone call with her husband, Stas, and held the phone so he could see Iryna laying in her open casket before the mass of friends and family arrived. Anna stayed on the call with him for the duration, and through the tears he got a glimpse of the impact Iryna and her mother had made in America. A prime example, the retirement community gave Iryna her first job. Varied residents who remember Iryna or who know Anna still works there, to James' funeral home by the dozens, shuttle bus load after shuttle bus load. In all, more than 100 people came to pay their respects, the family estimates. The embassy of Ukraine reached out to the Zarutskas to offer their condolences in addition to assistance with bringing Iryna's remains back to Kiev. But Anne declined. Iryna loved the United States, Scott says. In explaining her mother's thinking, the last 3 years were really the best years of her life. She was very, very happy here. This is where she wanted to be. And so at her mother's directive, we buried her here. The family is still trying to decide what to engrave on her headstone, perhaps rendering all of one of Iryna's favorite tattoos, or maybe inspired by her artwork left in her old room at her aunt and uncle's, a sketch of an animal or a flower or some other artistic flourish, all of which is being left untouched until 40 days after her passing per the cultural tradition. Whatever it is, they hope to keep the site of her grave as private as they can, as far as what the public can see. Well, they've come to realize there's not much they can control. All they can hope for is that time will start to heal again, and if there's an image of Iryna that endures, it's one of her smiling. And here's a picture of her. The caption reads, "Iryna Zarutska with Teddy, her favorite of the Haskell's dogs, who passed away around the time she moved out in Maine. She felt very protective by him." Her uncle says, courtesy of Zarutska's family. It says the story was originally published on September 16th at 5 a.m. Eastern, probably. That's where Charlotte is, in the Eastern time zone. That's the end of the article, and that is how the Zarutska family wants Iryna to be remembered, not for her horrible passing. And I hope no one else has to suffer the fate that Iryna suffered. She lived a good life, as short as it was. My condolences to the family. Thank you for watching. Have any questions, comments, anything you want to add, or to tell me I left something out, please put them down below. I welcome any sort of commentary. Again, thank you for watching. If you like this video, tell me by leaving a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I don't do Twitter, X, or meta properties like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, all those things that they have, and any that they might have added in the future, like threads. I will see you in the next video.